Our world, everything that we care about, is in terrible danger. For the vast majority of the human race, the most fundamental right, the right to life itself, is threatened by the growing danger of nuclear war. And we are acting as though this danger didn't exist. We're going about our daily lives really oblivious to this threat hanging over us. It wasn't always like this. In the 1980s, almost everyone on the planet was acutely aware of the danger posed by nuclear weapons. But when the Cold War ended, we all put this out of mind. We acted as though the danger had gone away. It hadn't. Thousands of nuclear weapons remained, and they are now available in a world increasingly torn by conflict. We urgently need to educate ourselves again about this danger, because unless we face it, unless we break the cycle of denial that we are currently living in, we are not going to escape this danger. The current crisis is most clearly exemplified by the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the repeated threats to use nuclear weapons that have flown from the Kremlin since then. But that's not the only source of danger. The relations between the United States and China are extremely perilous. There is an active trade war going on at this time, which could easily escalate into a military conflict. The situation in Korea poses an ongoing threat of nuclear conflict. The situation now in the Middle East, where Israel has nuclear weapons and Iran is perhaps planning to build them, is extraordinarily dangerous. And the situation in South Asia is perhaps the most dangerous of all. Earlier this year, these two countries, India and Pakistan, each with a significant nuclear arsenal, fought a mini-war that could easily have escalated into a large-scale nuclear war, which would have been a disaster not just for South Asia, but for the entire planet. And so, in this situation, which is complicated further by rapid developments in cyber technology, which increase the danger of accidental nuclear war through cyber terrorism, and all of this is taking place against the background of a progressive climate crisis, which is pushing the world towards greater conflict. In this situation, it is imperative that we remind ourselves of what is at stake, of what is going to happen if nuclear weapons are used, because we have forgotten that, and to our great peril. So I want to spend a few minutes explaining to you and reminding us all of what will happen if nuclear weapons are used again. And I want to start by describing what would happen to a single city in a modern nuclear attack. With the 80th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki coming up in just under 2 weeks, we're all going to be seeing images of the terrible destruction of these two cities. And these are very powerful warnings to us of what nuclear weapons can do. But the main thing that we need to understand as we look at these images is that they do not begin to prepare us for what will happen if nuclear weapons are used again today. The bomb that destroyed Hiroshima had the force of 15 kilotons, 15,000 tons of conventional explosive. Most of the weapons in the US and Russian arsenals today are 100 to 800 kilotons, 6 to 50 times more powerful than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. And a major target city, like New York, or Moscow, or Beijing, is not targeted with one bomb. New York is probably targeted with anywhere from 10 to 15, possibly 20 of these warheads. And so I'm going to use a model to describe what would happen with one single explosion. The megatonnage in this model, the explosive force, is perhaps a little bit bigger than would actually hit New York. The destruction I'm going to describe to you is a significant underestimate, because you cause far more damage if you use many smaller weapons and spread them out over the area that you're trying to destroy. Within 1,000th of a second of the detonation of this bomb, a fireball would form, reaching out for 3 kilometers in every direction, 6 kilometers across. Within this area, everything would be vaporized. The buildings, the trees, the people, the upper level of the earth itself would disappear. To a distance of 6 kilometers in every direction, the explosion would generate winds greater than 1,000 kilometers per hour. Mechanical forces of that magnitude destroy anything that human beings can build. This building would disappear. There'd be no trace left behind. To a distance of 9 kilometers in every direction, the heat would be so intense that automobiles would melt. And to a distance of 25 kilometers in every direction, the heat would still be so intense that everything flammable would burn. Paper, cloth, wood, plastic, gasoline, heating oil, it would all ignite. And you'd get hundreds of thousands of fires, which over the next half hour would coalesce into a firestorm, 50 kilometers across, covering 1,900 square kilometers. Within this entire area, the temperature would rise to 800 degrees centigrade. All of the oxygen would be consumed, and every living thing would die. In the case of New York, or Moscow, or Beijing, we're talking about 12 to 15, possibly 18 million people dead in a half an hour. And if this were part of a large-scale war involving any of these three nuclear superpowers, this kind of destruction would occur at every major city in the countries involved in the conflict. All told, perhaps 100, 200, even 300 million people dead in an afternoon. And those who survived in the countries which fought the war would find themselves in a wasteland which we cannot imagine. None of the things that we require to keep ourselves alive would exist. There'd be no electric grid, no internet, no cell phones, no system for distributing food, no law and order. And in the months which followed this initial attack, the vast majority of people in the countries which fought this war who did not die on the first day would also die. They would die from starvation, from epidemic disease, from radiation poisoning. But this is only part of the story. I've only talked about what happens to the people who live in the countries which fight the war. This conflict would be a disaster for the entire planet, because all of these fires would put enormous amounts of soot, about 150 million tons, into the upper atmosphere, blocking out the sun and dropping temperatures across the planet, an average of 10 degrees centigrade. In the interior regions of North America and Eurasia, the temperatures would drop 25 to 30 degrees centigrade. We have not seen conditions on this planet that cold in 18,000 years, since the coldest moment of the last ice age. And under these conditions, all of the ecosystems which have evolved since the end of that ice age would collapse, food production would stop, and according to a study that was published in the summer of 2022, in the first 2 years, 3/4 of the human race, 6 billion people, would starve to death. The study only ran for 2 years. The famine would continue, and we don't know what the ultimate death toll would be. It is possible, under these conditions, that we would become extinct as a species. That same study showed that even a much smaller war, as might take place between India and Pakistan, could put enough soot into the atmosphere and cause enough climate disruption to trigger a global famine as well. It would not be quite as severe, but in the first 2 years, it would kill 2 billion people worldwide. And again, the famine would continue beyond the 2 years of the study. So this is the danger that we're living with today. Every day that we allow these weapons to continue to exist. And we need to understand that. We need to understand that we are not here today. We have not survived this long because we knew what we were doing, because we had wise leaders, or sound military doctrine, or infallible technology. We're here today, in the words of former U.S. Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, because, and I'm quoting him, we lucked out. It was luck that prevented nuclear war. And the current situation, the current policy of all the countries which possess nuclear weapons is nothing more than a hope for continued good luck, which is a totally insane basis for security policy, nationally or internationally. If we allow these weapons to continue to exist, It is not a question of if they will be used. It is only a question of when. But this terrible scenario is not the future that must be. Nuclear weapons are not a force of nature. It is not as though an asteroid is coming at the planet and there's nothing we can do about it. These are little machines that we've built ourselves with our own hands. Most of them are about the size of the chairs that you're sitting in. We know how to take them apart. We've already dismantled some 50,000 nuclear warheads. We know exactly how to dismantle the 12,000 that remain, and we could do it in 3 or 4 years. The only thing that is missing is the political will to make the countries, the 9 governments which have these weapons, take that action. And that is where all of us come in, because we need to create that political will. Internationally, there's a campaign called the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. It was started in 2007. In just 10 years, in 2017, it secured here at the United Nations the adoption of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, an international treaty which bans not just the use of nuclear weapons, but simply their possession. That treaty entered into force in January of 2021 when the 50th country ratified the treaty. At this point, over almost 100 countries, nearly a half of the countries in the world, have joined this treaty. But the 9 countries which have nuclear weapons have not. And so our attention must now turn to changing the policy of those countries. For those who live here in the United States, we have launched a campaign called Back from the Brink. And we have started a student wing of that campaign called Students for Nuclear Disarmament that is mobilizing students in high schools and on college campuses to bring about fundamental change in policy here in the United States and to urge the United States to provide leadership to the world by entering into negotiation with the other 8 countries which have nuclear weapons to work out the details to abolish these weapons according to an agreed-upon timetable. This is a very difficult situation that we're in. And by talking to you about this morning, I'm putting, I think, a tremendous responsibility on your shoulders. If you weren't previously aware of this information or if you'd forgotten about it, knowing about it poses a real responsibility. If you know the whole world is at risk and you know there's something you can do about it, then there is a responsibility to take action. And I think many of us feel that responsibility as a burden, which it is. It's a pretty heavy weight to carry. But I hope we can all look at this somewhat differently. Every one of us wants to do good with our life. We want our lives to matter. That's why we've all come to this conference. Those of us living today have literally been given the opportunity to save the world. And there is nothing better that anyone can ever do with his or her life. In the Hebrew Bible, there's a passage in which it's reported that God said, "Behold, I have set before you life and death. Therefore choose life so that you and your children can live." That is literally the choice before all of humanity today. And so let us choose wisely. Let us act with courage and with determination so that indeed our children can live. No one of us is expected to solve this problem alone. But each one of us is expected, is required to do that part of the job which we are able to do. And if every one of us does that, I think we're going to succeed. And I think that someday in the very near future, we're going to be able to look in the mirror and say, quite honestly, I helped save the world. And that's going to be a very great thing. And I hope we'll all be part of that. Thank you.